She heard scratching from the walls, her name being called out and breathing through the vents, but nobody believed her until somebody else saw a woman in white. That's when police would come and search and find nothing, time and time again. Nobody would believe them until they saw the writing on the walls. You see, sometimes the most scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. When the young mind is left to wander, it looks for media for guidance. But when fantasy is the role model, how does one know where imagination stops and reality begins? It's 1986. Horror movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th are having teens all across the nation filling up the theaters. Tina Bowen was one of them. She loved that feeling, the fear, the suspense, the idea that something could be hiding just out of sight. Late at night, she'd be talking on the phone with somebody she had actually never met. Most nights, Tina stayed in her room, doors closed, lights off. With the recent passing of her mom, her dad's attention was spread thin. Between going to work, catching up on sleep, and handling all the other kids, there wasn't enough of him to go around. So she sought comfort in other people. One night, she decides to leave the house to go meet up with the boy that she had been talking with over the phone for the last few weeks. They were going to go on a movie date, and she was excited. It felt nice because this was the first time in a long time that she felt normal. When she arrived and saw him for the first time, her jaw dropped. He looked nothing like how he described himself over the phone. His pants had scuff marks, his hair wasn't done. It looked like he hadn't bathed in days. It looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were sunken in with huge dark circles. But nevertheless, for whatever reason, she decided to continue with the date. But afterwards, they would go their separate ways and she would decide she would never talk to him again. But she knew something happened to her that night. Something in her changed. Shortly after, she would begin telling her dad that she's hearing voices. Someone's calling out to her. She tried to ignore it, but night after night, the voices came back. Sometimes whispers, sometimes laughing, sometimes silence. These demonic movies must have possessed her dad's thinking. He takes her to church to try to get help. But when they got back, the radio was on and the drawers were open. Thinking that someone had broken in, they immediately called the police, who arrived to investigate and see no signs of forced entry. Matter of fact, nothing was taken. Tina, for up to a year, would plead with her dad that there's something there, that she's hearing voices, but he wouldn't believe her. He was convinced that something was wrong with her. Something possessed her. At least that's until one of the other family members saw a woman in white walking through the halls. That's when the writing on the walls started. Things like, "I see you. You'll never get rid of me. I'm coming for you." And no matter how many times they tried to wipe away these writings, they would always come back. Whatever had possessed Tina now decided to take over the entire house and everybody in it. Tina wakes up one night screaming. Dad jumps out of bed, runs to her room. He sees her pointing at the closet. He goes and he opens the door to see somebody standing there, blood all over their face, hatchet in hand. He slams the door, grabs his kids, gets out the house, immediately calls 911. Police would arrive, search all through the house, and walk out in handcuffs a 15-year-old boy. The same boy that Tina had went out with almost a year ago. His name, Daniel LaPlante. You see, after Daniel's date with Tina, when he didn't hear back from her, he became obsessed. He started to stalk her, watch her, and waited until the moment that they had left the house, leaving the door unlocked. That's when he would sneak in and hide in the walls for almost a year, just tormenting the family. But this wasn't Daniel's first run-in with the authorities, nor would it be its last. Born in 1970 in Massachusetts, he would often have run-in with the cops, but not because of anything he had done, but because of what was happening at home. Violence was a norm for young Daniel. At home, seeing his mom and dad fighting, but sometimes Daniel being the recipient of it. He learned early, it's best not to be seen. It's better just to watch. To be careful. Teachers would describe Daniel as shy, quiet, reserved, always kind of to himself. Neighbors would hear his parents fighting and would attempt to reach out to Daniel to have him play with their kids. But Daniel would always refuse, shaking his head no and keeping his distance. School wouldn't be any better as he struggled, not just academically, but with friends there as well. As a result, his mind would drift off into fantasy. He created a world in his mind where he felt safe. He became quite the storyteller, lying with ease. By the time he was in his teen years, it was clear he was socially awkward. He would barely speak, not look anybody in the eyes. But I mean, like, how could he? His life was hell. He spent more time in his head than looking at the world around him because all he would see was pain, hurt, and violence. He lived in fear, surrounded by things out of his control. Whether it was in his nature or as a result of his trauma, He saw it as a game almost, to try to watch people without them noticing that he was there. But he was still just a boy, craving companionship, love. This led him to using the Yellow Pages to cold call random people in the hometown of Pepperville, Massachusetts. That's how he ended up getting a hold of Tina, who he thought was his first real friend. But after she ignored him, he did what he did best: watch without being seen. But instead, it wasn't a game anymore. He was hurt. His hurt would manifest into anger over the course of a year, watching Tina through the walls, until he decided to act, grabbing a hatchet from the family garage, trying to camouflage his face with ketchup and mayo, smearing it all over. And it would have been successful if it wasn't for the dad acting so quickly. That's when authorities would arrest him and attempt to send him to juvie. You see, Pepperell, Massachusetts was a small town of about 10,000 people, leaving only about 10 cops for the area. So when they heard of a boy hiding in the walls with a hatchet, they didn't hesitate to throw young Daniel in jail. But since he was only 16 years old, he couldn't be tried as an adult. While on trial, it would be revealed of how troubled he really was. His home life and documented domestic violence cases would be brought up. He was a victim, just a little boy looking for guidance. And due to the fact that he didn't actually end up hurting anybody with the hatchet, the argument made was that he was just trying to intimidate them. He didn't know how to regulate his emotions. There was just something psychologically wrong at the time because of all the trauma he was witnessing at home for so long. So the court ended up taking pity on him. Instead of juvie, he was sent to Bridgewater State Hospital. The goal was to rehabilitate Daniel. He was still young after all, full of potential. All he needed was someone to care, someone to take notice of him. Finally, he was gonna get the help he needed. That was the reasoning for his sentencing, at least. The entire time there, he was constantly evaluated. They viewed him as compliant. He didn't cause any trouble. Yeah, sure, he was socially awkward and didn't talk too much. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't the monster that the police made him out to be. At least that's what the director thought. But what they didn't know was that Daniel was in his prime environment. He thrived in chaos. He knew how to tune out the noise. All he had to do was shut up and keep his head down, something his entire childhood trained him to do. His compliance was viewed as obedience. His lack of aggression was viewed as improvement. So shortly after being admitted there, he was released. But like every other time in his life, he was overlooked again. He didn't get better, he got worse. This time, he wasn't imagining anymore. He was rehearsing, watching, learning what people did when they thought they were alone. He was given all the time in the world to obsess over his darkest desires, while at the same time given an environment to practice the predatory skills he was being trained. When Daniel LaPlante was released from the state hospital, nothing about him raised any concerns. He didn't spiral. He didn't lash out. He did what he had learned to do his entire life: stay invisible. And for a little while, nothing happened. His silence was viewed as recovery. Nobody would have thought that he was preparing. While Daniel was put away, someone else was living a normal life. A family locking their doors at night, believing they were safe. They had no idea that a monster was just released, soon to be lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting to go inside. Less than a month after Daniel being released, only being 17 at the time, he began to stalk, looking for his next prey. He would venture off into the woods when he would stumble across a home, fields and trees separating it from the rest. Through the window, he could see inside a dinner table, 2 small children on opposite sides, a husband at the end, and his pregnant wife serving them all. Everyone had smiles from ear to ear. Bellies were full. It was clear that love filled that home. It was such a cliche moment, something out of the movies, he thought. He sat in the cold, watching, reminiscing, comparing the differences of their childhood and his. He waited there until dinner was over and the lights were turned off. He wasted no time and moved, hiding under the cover of night, making his way inside the house. Through the back kitchen door, walking past the knives, he walks upstairs and opens the master bedroom. And it was empty. The family wasn't home. You see, he wouldn't dare enter a home while people were still there. Instead, he liked it when they were completely empty. Almost as if he was role-playing. When he walked into an empty house, he took ownership of it, moving furniture, messing with pictures, changing things to his liking. But before ever leaving, he would always take something from the home because he felt like it was his. He would take things like cell phones, cash, a cable box, literally whatever he can get his hands on. Then he would just leave. And like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he would go into town, walking shoulder to shoulder sometimes with his next victims. He hid in the shadows and watched, observed, and planned. Beautifully average homes was his favorite. He loved when nobody was there. He would enter, chin up, chest puffed out. He walked into his homes and almost in disgust would look at the walls and see pictures of strangers in his house. Furniture not to his liking, he moved it. Food he wanted, he ate it. Cash laying around, he took it. Like a surgeon, he had a system and a ritual every time he entered these homes. But like surgeons, the joy comes the next day, hearing from the patients. Daniel loved to walk the streets and hear the whispers of fear circulating in conversations about the house that he entered in the night before. No one knew who it was and how they kept getting in. This was his enjoyment. But something changed, not overnight, but over time. The internal sinister smile and nod of approval he had when he heard the whispers of what he had done was beginning to fade. It wasn't enough. He found himself mindlessly walking through the woods that he used to help him hide during the night, until he found himself stopped in front of a home. He hadn't seen it before, but something about it felt familiar. Maybe it was because it was during the day and he wasn't used to seeing the homes like this, but who really knows? He could tell nobody was there, so he walked right in. He walked in ready to critique this home, but instead he saw that the furniture was moved to his liking. And the pictures on the walls, they didn't feel like strangers. They felt familiar. Something about this home feels warm to him. He's been here before, he's thinking. As he's walking upstairs to inspect the rooms, he would hear the door downstairs open. That's a signal to sneak out the window and get out. But this time he pauses. This is my home, the place that I have set up and perfected. Why should I leave? These are the thoughts that are circling in his head. So instead of his usual escape, he stays hidden so he could watch. He would see a pregnant woman walk up the stairs. Her name, Priscilla Gustafson. He recognized her. She's the same woman that he had saw the first night that he went out to the woods. The mother serving her children, serving her husband with love and warmth in her heart. She's caring, compassionate, and beautiful, he thought. That's why the home felt so familiar to him. He had already been there. Following close behind her was 5-year-old William. And like an animal, Daniel pounced on them, throwing young William into the closet and Priscilla onto the bed. I'm sorry, this is where things are going to get really wicked and just gross and disgusting. So please, like, if you get triggered easily, like, go ahead and skip a little bit past this video, or go ahead and skip a little bit past this part. I'm going to keep this relatively pretty brief because I don't want to give more attention to this disgustingness. But essentially, he threw her onto the bed, tied her up, did you know what to her. All the while, little 5-year-old William was in the closet, hearing everything. Once he finished, he would put 2 shots into her head, pull out William, take him to the bathroom, and then drown this poor kid. That's when Daniel, this sick monster, would just go and look back at what he did, almost feeling good about himself, but at the same time, feeling nothing. As he's walking down the stairs, 7-year-old Abigail would get home from school. She was calling out to her mom, expecting to have lunch per usual. And instead, she saw this just waste of life come around the corner, grab her, and drown her in the other bathroom. That's when Daniel would go and take to the woods and hide like the animal he was, in solitude, to be left alone and watch. Andrew, the father, would get home around 5:30, expecting to see his little kids running up to him, hugging him, his wife kissing him and greeting him. Instead, it was just silent. He's going up the stairs and notices that it's wet, walks into his bedroom and just screams. Doesn't even take the time to look for his kids because subconsciously he knows. He knows what happened to them. He calls 911. Where they go and see this absolute massacre. Police would inform Daniel that unfortunately, his wife would undergo labor during the traumatic event, and his whole family was gone in just a blink of an eye. But they were going to do everything in their power to catch this sicko that did this. Witnesses would come forward and describe Daniel LaPlante to the police. The time was ticking to find him. The next day, a press conference was held. Daniel LaPlante is a person of interest. He is deemed extremely dangerous and unstable. We have reason to suspect he is armed and dangerous. If you see him, do not approach and immediately contact police. People started talking and asking about his home life, his mental health history, bringing up the fact that he was already brought in on similar charges not even a year ago. Why was he able to be let free? Why was he walking the streets? People were demanding answers because it's not like the police didn't know what he was capable of. Look what happened with the Bowen family. He didn't recover from the state hospital. He was just compliant, complacent. And that is deemed improvement? The staff weren't doing their job. They were just collecting a paycheck, people were thinking. Andrew's worst nightmare became the talk of the town. All the while, Daniel was roaming free. People collected volunteers and scoured the entire town without any luck. It wouldn't be until December 3rd when police would find Daniel hiding in the trash can. No remorse on his face, just irritated that he got caught. Walking into the courtroom, head held high, like he accomplished something. All the while, Andrew had to go back to an empty home, filled with the memories of his children and wife. He woke up December 1st, not knowing that would be the last time he would rub the belly of his wife, talking to his unborn child. The last time that he would say, "I love you" to Abigail and William. The last time he would hear the words, "Dad, I love you, be safe" from his family. He didn't know that that would be the last time his heart would be whole. Daniel, the monstrosity, stood up on trial alone, just like he's been his entire life. He never felt love, cared for. He was a human punching bag who got tired of it. Love didn't exist in his world. It was just something out of the movies, he thought. Just like how the Gustafson family looked. The night he watched through their windows, the boy who lived in the shadows, only meant to observe everybody, was now being observed by the entire world. In 1988, at 17 years old, he was sentenced to serve life without parole. But in 2017, a new law would state that no minor should serve life without a possibility of parole. They deserved a second chance. That's when Daniel would get on the stand and say this: "Words cannot fully capture what I have done. I murdered 3 innocent people. Because of me, a 5-year-old boy will never turn 6. There's a 7-year-old girl that will never turn 8. Because of me, a woman will never be able to give birth to her 3rd child. I robbed an unborn child of his first breath. A husband was never able again to hear from his family, 'I love you.' I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow, but I am truly sorry for the harm I have caused. From the very essence of who I am, from the depth of my soul, I am sorry." Frank Bowen, the father of Daniel's first target, would publicly say, "If he gets another chance like he did when he was younger, I will personally kill him. He left my family in perpetual fear." Carol Gustafson, Andrew's second wife, would say that Daniel should rot in hell for what he did. "My husband was plagued by nightmares of what happened that night until the day he died of cancer in 2014. For 2 years, the trial would go on until psychiatrists would deem that Daniel was unremorseful, having no sorrow for what he did. The judge would send Daniel back to serve out the rest of his life in prison. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, truly deeply from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. Please, if you enjoyed it, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you again for weekly uploads.